Hello, my name is Debbie Forster, and thank you so much for joining us at our Inclusion in Tech Festival. It's great to have you online. If you were here this afternoon, thank you for joining us. If you stayed all the way through, and a few of you apparently did, well done, thank you. It is time for our afternoon cuppa. I've got mine. I hope you're there because we've got a lot to talk through today. Now, if you are from this afternoon, you can ignore the next few seconds. If you're new to the screen, welcome. If we were in the real world, I'd be giving you the hygiene of where the fire exit is and where the loos are. What I'm going to tell you here is what's on our screen. So just below my picture, if you go, a ribbon should pop up. That's where you can turn this on to full definition, so you can count all the freckles and wrinkles on my forehead. You can also, if you'd like, turn on the closed captioning, so you can have that going on in the background if that suits you. We want this to be interactive. I was so desperately real 3D interaction, but the best we can do is to try and hear your questions, and we will do your questions, even if it's not for today's session. If you have a question on inclusion, diversity in tech, please share it with us. If it fits in with one of our panels, we'll talk about it. If we can cover it off when we're going through between sessions, we'll cover it off, and somehow we'll get back to you. Also, to try and think about, farther down the screen, are you joining for tomorrow? If you haven't, how come you're not? It's going to be even better tomorrow than today. So scroll down. You can sign up for tomorrow's session, both the working lunch and the afternoon cuppa. We'll often refer to our annual report. If you've not had a chance to look at our report, this is a fantastic piece of analysis that looks at what we have now representing over 16% of the entire tech work population. This is where you can go to hear what works, what doesn't work, to compare and look at the stats and see how you measure up as an organization. So if you've not had a look, have a look there. And then I'd love for you to take part in social. Now, of course, you're going to be 100% focused what's going on the screen, but I would love, maybe not if during the session, during or after, jump onto LinkedIn, jump onto Twitter, tell us what resonated with you. Is there something that really rang true? Do you still have a question? Did we say something that you really disagree with? You can reach out on social, and we'd love to carry on that conversation tonight and tomorrow and beyond. Okay. Oh, and logistics. I have to tell you, I don't know what's going on, but my broadband gets a little funny sometimes, so I might look a little blurry. My team would also say that sometimes I'm just a little bit blurry and I need a bit more caffeine. So I'll keep sipping here. But if you lose me, we'll still keep talking. I might even go to Avatar. But what's important is you hear from our people today. All right. Now, what are we doing this evening? So for this evening, we're a not-for-profit. It's free to join. If you're not a signatory, you can go down and find out more about that on the screen as well. We're a not-for-profit, and we're determined to ensure that what we do goes out and is free for any company that wants to work with us. Now, to do that, we do need some funding. And so it is because of sponsors like Beasley, who are our headline sponsor for today's event. It's for people like our principal partners. That would include the DCMS, that's HP, that's Nominet, that's Global, that is looking at PwC, in terms of these are the companies that bring it together. Today's session, this afternoon, we looked at experts looking at tech. This afternoon and tomorrow, we want to hear from all of you as employers. What's working, what's not. We've really enjoyed working with Beasley to plan the 2 days of this festival. So I took some time to sit down with Brad and with Chelsea to get their view on what was happening with the report, were their thoughts, what are they looking forward to in the rest of the festival. So let's have a look and hear from them.
This is a chance for us to sort of have a quick chat before we go into the main event for the day. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, Brad?
Sure. Brad O'Connor, work at Beasley, and I'm the head of technology, and I'm driving the diversity and inclusion agenda.
And my name's Chelsea. I'm Beasley's inclusion partner, so I drive our diversity and inclusion strategy globally for Beasley, work really closely with Brad and the rest of our tech team.
Super. All right. So we've got the formalities over. Thank you both for joining me here today. You know, I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone that 2021 is, we're going to put it down at best, was a challenging year. how did that work out for Beazley from an EDI perspective? Because with everything happening, everything changing, it's really easy for things like EDA to fall by the wayside. How was 2021 for both of you? Brad?
Yeah, so for us, last year was the first year we had a really deliberate strategy to tackle this. And we created a kind of augmented leadership team and asked for volunteers. So we had about 7 to 10 people helping drive these initiatives. So that was the first year we had a deliberate strategy and a team of people really driving towards that strategy. So that worked out really well. And the kind of focus is really with data. And we were looking at the data to see what kind of actionable insights we could pick up from that. And then also, I think, partnerships are extremely important. Everyone's having the same sort of challenges. So partnering with Tech Talent Charter, partnering with Code First Girls, really important to help kind of learn from other people's experiences and expertise.
That's super. And it's great to hear that you, like a lot of our signatories, didn't forget this in the midst of it, but really started doubling down. And, we've loved working with in partnership, and Code First Girls has been one of our founding signatories in terms of doing that. And if anyone in the audience would like to hear a little bit more about that, between our main sessions are some intercessions, and you can hear from Beazley talking about how working with Code First Girls made a real difference within the organization. Chelsea, is taking a step further removed. How was 2021 from your perspective?
I remember at the start of the pandemic in 2020 thinking that we weren't really going to end up doing much from a diversity perspective, because everyone had kind of bigger problems almost, and how do we work in this hybrid world, and I couldn't have been more wrong. And what we've seen really since March or June 2020 is a continual ramp up about our focus on inclusion and diversity, and 2021 really cemented that. I think we've seen more and more people get comfortable with the topic and get comfortable moving to action, which has been really, really important. I think it's less of, and actually the hybrid working and how, the worry about women returning, would they return back to the office? What should companies do? It's been so much in the public eye and under it's a constant topic of conversation, really, isn't it? That I think I feel like the work that we do has just become really, really in demand, but a real drive to see results and not keep having some of the same conversations that we've probably been having for a few years now.
And that's great to hear. And it's very much the flow of the way the next 2 days are going to be. And Beazley leaning in and having those conversations, raising the awareness, but moving to action. That echoes, last year was our festival focusing on having those difficult conversations, but then moving to action. And then this year is very much about, we have the data. What are we doing with it? It is about moving into action and trying to drive things in that perspective. And we're going to have, sessions to try and look at things like hybrid working, etc. The report launched last week is kind of groundbreaking for us in a lot of ways. Now, you've had a sneak preview of what we put into the report. What leapt out for you, Brad?
Yeah, I think the first thing to note was you've got 162 new signatories, which is amazing, amazing growth in the last year, especially considering all the challenges that 2021 provided. I think it now represents 15% of the UK tech workforce, which is great. But anyone who's listening to this who hasn't signed up, what are you waiting for? It's free to sign up. You get so many benefits. All you need to do is provide a bit of data.
Listen to Brad. Everyone listen to Brad and do what Brad says, yes?
So a call to arms, those 85%, whoever you are, please sign up. We need the data. And I think looking at looking actually at the data, it says, women in tech is sort of trending in the right direction from 25 to 27%, which is a great increase, albeit relatively small. And I think it kind of underlines the real importance for supporting alternative routes into technology. I think we discussed, in the sort of festival last year, you can't hire your way out of this problem. Everyone like myself have set goals and targets to hire more women and more diverse people, but what we need to do is get more people more from diverse backgrounds into the tech sector, and those alternative routes into technology is a great way of doing that.
And, couldn't agree with you more. And we're going to have a session on that where we hear from companies that are leaning into those so that we can start sharing. But it's mainstream now, isn't it? And for us at the charter, we're using 2022 to work with our employers and with our providers to start shifting that focus. So it's not an alternative route into tech anymore, but it becomes mainstream. It's just another way that we make this happen. Chelsea, you looked at the report, and I think you felt even more ambitious. So what leapt out for you?
Well, first of all, I love the report. I love the examples that you've given from different organisations. The gender appointment ratio from Unilever. I love that idea, and I've been thinking about that now since I read the report about all the different ways we could include that. What I think frustrates me is that it's only been a 2% increase. And when we looked at the report, it says, building awareness and raising awareness is still a main priority. And I suppose I'm looking at this thinking we should have moved past building awareness. Now we are all incredibly aware. we're having this because we're all aware of what the challenges are. And I think I get hugely frustrated in a lot of either panel discussions around diversity. We spend a lot of time highlighting the problem. We spend a lot of time really saying, oh, this is the issue. And we need to move into, well, what are we going to do to solve it? What are we putting in place? What are we trying? If we keep saying now, oh, it's really hard, that'll be the same thing that we say in 5 years' time when nothing will have moved, or we might move 1% at a time. So I want to see the pace of change really quicken. I think there are some great examples of that happening in there. Brad might have heard me say this before, because one of my favorite phrases is, if we're going to get somewhere we've never been, we have to do things we've never done. And I think it's this having to make conscious decisions to be bold, or to do things differently, that's going to drive us forward. If we keep hiring in a traditional image under traditional ways, we're going to end up with a very similar workforce that we've had previously. We can't just have expected that workforce to have changed because we want it to. And I think that to me is right. What are we doing to really actively change that?
Couldn't agree more. And I think I love the ambition in that. And I think that's what we're going to hear. Brad, as well as, it's not just that we're 15% that is now forward. What we're really excited about in the report is, yes, we're statistically significant, but by getting companies to tell us this is what's working, we, for the first time, are able to really lean into sharing things from companies, specific things. And that we were able to work with you then to curate these 2 days of hearing from companies of this works and this works and this works, so that we can start moving faster. We can be more ambitious. And I love that idea of when we're doing things differently. And I'm always saying we've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and we have to move this dial. And it only comes if we start doing things very, very differently. And so if you've not been to one of our events before, get ready, fasten your seatbelt, get a piece of paper, write this out. Know that this is part of the whole thing that we do across the year. We do hackathons. We have an open playbook of best practice. We have signatory spotlights. This is where you come to hear, absolutely what you say, Chelsea. When we started the charter, it was because when somebody approached me about it, Sinead Bunting, who wrote the charter, my first comment was, if I have to go to one more roundtable event on why there's no women in tech, my head is just going to explode. And if I have to hear one more company reinvent the wheel and get really excited, I'm going to start telling the truth and get in trouble. Well, the charter, we are the opposite of that. This is us leaning into hearing from companies like you, from others, to talk about what's happening. And so that is what these 2 days are going to be about. For the working lunch, for the evening cuppas, you will be hearing from 2 panels. Chelsea, you're joining one this evening to hear what are we doing that's having that impact. So thinking about the program, because again, you've helped curate it, you've seen the sneak preview of that. What are you most looking forward to? What are the sessions that you think are going to give you those tidbits to really drive what you're doing in 22? Brad?
Yes, I think, first of all, the theme, This Works, I think it's a great theme. Really interesting, really looking forward to hearing people kind of talk about what actually works for them. But in terms of the kind of 3 sessions that I sort of highlighted that I'm definitely going to tune into. One, the report headlines, listening to that come to life. And I think last year I tuned into that session, and two things that really resonated with me last year was the startups that seem to have really good gender diversity, as well as the sort of charitable kind of sector. So really looking at what can we learn from startups, what can we learn from the charitable sector, and is it that women want to work more in organizations that have a greater purpose, or have the startups, do they have a lot less red tape around their recruitment and bureaucracy? So what can we learn from the data and the companies and industries and size of the companies that are doing good things? The other two sessions, measuring impact, we've done a lot of work at Beazley. As I said, we've kind of created this augmented leadership team. A lot of the team have put a lot of time and effort, but how are we really measuring the impact? And then the third one, which is really exciting as well, that invisible lens of diversity. We often quite talk about gender or race. I think neurodiversity is really exciting, really interesting, especially in the tech sector, and also the sort of socio-economic diversity as well, something that's quite close to mind.
Make sure that we're not just doing what we already know how to do. And it's not that we're done with things like gender or ethnicity, but we need to be, as Chelsea says, we need to be more ambitious. We need to look at those things. We know from our surveys last year and this year, social mobility, neurodiversity are really hot topics. And so it would be great to hear tomorrow on from some of our panel on what's happening in the space. Chelsea, what about you? What are the sessions? Of course, your session, I'm hoping you're tuning in for, because I need you in that chair. What are some of the other sessions that you're looking forward to?
Well, and actually, if I wasn't speaking, I would be tuning into the data one. I think it's my own sort of passion. I think myth busting is such an important part of the work that we do here. There's so many assumptions when it comes to EDI, as you've mentioned. The one that I think I'm looking forward to, the retention and development session. I think recruitment is only it's one part of our diversity challenge, and sometimes I think it's the easier part of the challenge to bring people in. It's very different then for managers to have to manage teams that are very different to the teams they might have managed before, or to try and really understand the drivers of a diverse team. I think that's a real challenge, and I don't think there's actually it's not as much of a topic really as it could be when it comes to how does a manager really flex to get the most out of that team? How do we make sure that we are that we're really offering opportunities to those people to grow professionally, to feel like they're part of the company. So yeah, that's definitely the one that I'm
and I think it's vitally important, because I think we know, although there is that slow growth for women, the reason it's not faster growth is we're not retaining enough women. And if we're not getting them into leadership, we're really not changing the dynamic. And we know, from the ethnicity report, that actually it is less the problem unless you start looking across that leadership and management. So really, really important in that piece. Okay, well, and I hope people on the session, even if you haven't signed up, you can still sign up for those other sessions. We'd love to have you join us for those. And then, okay, it's already March of 2022. God help us. That's the end of Q1 for many of us. We're starting to come back to a normal. What are the big priorities? Where are you leaning into now for what's happening at Beazley in terms of EDI?
So we've always had quite a bespoke approach to inclusion and diversity, and we try and tackle one thing and try and really get to the bottom of that thing. And so we'd started off originally with gender, and we'd moved to focus on race and ethnicity. Those really continue to be our two major challenges. And I feel like with some of the work we've done on gender, we can almost predict some of the challenges we'll see then in the future with race and ethnicity. We've been quite bold stating public company targets for women in leadership, for employee population makeup when it comes to race and ethnicity. The first time our the direct reports of the CEO have all been given specific objectives which relate to their end of year bonus about how well they're going to do against those diversity targets. So my focus this year is really on supporting them all to reach those. There's a lot of passion and enthusiasm for that, and everyone has got a slightly different challenge, so it's unpicking that. But I want to be able to say at this time next year, if we're in the same session, things have changed. Our numbers have grown. The data shows us that we've actually got better. I don't want to be sitting here next year and having having the same conversations we're having now. I want to have moved that on, I think.
But Chelsea, I think you've got the right approach there, because it's data driven. It's then accountability. And we talked about this last year, didn't we, about until we start using the data to set those targets, those KPIs, but then helping grow people to do it. That is how we move things forward. So I love the action driven approach. Brad, from your perspective, what's big for 2022?
Yeah, I think it's sort of doubling down on our strategy from last year, using that data to kind of make some decisions and change our actions. And also on the partnerships, obviously we're sponsor for the festival with the Tech Talent Charter. We're continuing our partnership with Code First Girls. We sponsored the Bright Network Tech Women in Tech conference as well. So I think the people we've hired recently, some of them they've joined Beazley because of all of our efforts in this space, and they want to continue that kind of driving campaign. So we're finding more and more people interested in the department to really help us. So it's just basically more of the same and kind of doubling down on our efforts. And I think Chelsea mentioned it. I read somewhere when I was reading about another insurance company this week, they mentioned focus fuels success, and our focus has been on gender recently. And I think we've seen our hiring stats have gone from hiring 1 in 3 roles as women to as much as 2 in 3 roles as women. So we've kind of doubled the number of hires. We're not hiring that many people at the moment because we've got a low attrition, so we're not really moving the dial, but the things we can control, we are making a positive impact. And I think we now might start looking towards the end of the year at different dimensions. Chelsea mentioned ethnicity and race, so that might become a bit of a focus for the team towards the end of the year.
And I think we think about Beazley as a very, very large organization, but in terms of teams, what you're talking about, Brad, I think will resonate with people from smaller companies that have fewer hires in a year. But it is about doing what you can, controlling what you can, moving in that way. And I like the way you combined what you do that has the inward focus, but what you do that has that outward focus, because it is when we're working together to actually change the sector and bringing companies together, not just looking at brand, that we see the real impact. So listen, have loved chatting with you today, have loved working with you on the festival across the whole days. Chelsea, we'll hear from you later today. Brad, I know you'll be tuning in. Thank you, everyone who's been in the session. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
And there you have it. So thinking now, let's start diving in deeper. Let's find out what's going on. Remember when we first started the Tech Talent Charter, it was data at its heart, but we're moving that on. And, I can measure the table sitting in front of me every day, but unless I have put that into action, it's going to stay the same size. So what we want to do is to hear from a panel of companies at different stages, different sizes, to find out how they are using the data to drive what they do. To host that, I've brought Edleen back, our director. She was, first of all, on one of our panels. I'm putting her back in the driver's seat. So over to you, Edleen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Debbie. And a huge thank you to our panel today towards the end of the day. Hopefully, we've still got a bit of energy to keep going because we're going to talk about some really interesting and exciting topics. As Debbie said, I'm Edleen. And for those of you who saw me earlier, this will be boring, but I am one of the directors of Tech Talent Charter. And in my day job, I also work for the Football Association as the International Relations, Corporate Affairs and Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Director. But today, we are not here to listen to me. We are here to listen to our esteemed and wonderful panel. So I'm going to get kick-started with some micro introductions. And there I want you in 30 to 45 seconds to just give a quick intro about who you are. And then I really want us to delve in and get some really strong examples about how organizations at different stages of their journey are using DEI data. So I'll start with Ellie. Ellie, if you could do a quick micro intro for us, please.
Hi, so Ellie Bradley. I'm the MD of Registry and Public Benefit at Nominet. Nominet runs the .uk registry for internet domain names. And we are a medium-sized business, about 300 people. So it creates some interesting challenges in this area. So I'm keen to talk about that.
Thank you so much, Ellie. We'll go to Lauren next.
Hi. First and foremost, I wanted to confirm that I didn't dye my hair to match the background, although it's a very happy coincidence that I kind of blend in. So thanks for having me. I am firmly in the choir, I think, that's been referenced today on previous sessions, passionate about driving a purpose-driven agenda in this space. I also happen to tick a few boxes as a female member of the LGBT community, and I also have a long-term health condition, also often referred to as a disability. In my day job, when I'm not blending into backgrounds on panels, I am fortunate enough to lead a wonderfully diverse data, advanced analytics and engineering team at Lloyds Banking Group.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. And we'll go to Chelsea next.
Thank you. So my name's Chelsea Sprong. I look after inclusion and diversity at Beazley. We're delighted to be sponsoring the Tech Talent Charter Festival. Beazley is an international insurance company, just over 1,500 people split across predominantly the US and the UK, and then Europe and Asia.
Fantastic. And last but absolutely by no means least, Morgan.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Morgan. I'm the leader of the data COE globally at Unilever, and I'm also incredibly passionate about diversity and lead our Women in Data campaign.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, I want us to get straight into the discussion. So I'm going to kickstart with talking about the start of a cycle of the employment journey. And Ellie, I'm going to go to you first. How can organizations use data to change the attraction and the recruitment process? So right at that entry point where you're trying to pull in talent from different backgrounds, different skills, different life experiences, how can you use data to support that?
So I think it obviously starts even before the data with the way that you're presenting yourself. And I know there's lots of learnings around that and making sure that you're presenting the image of the organization that you want to attract people into. But for us, we are, as I said, about 300 people. So and about half of our employee base are tech roles. And it's really about understanding kind of what is out there in the marketplace and what we should be recruiting from, I guess, really. We use tools like Horsefly and other things like that to really understand when we're going out for a tech engineering role, what is actually out there, what are the options for us, and then making sure that we're challenging ourselves then in terms of the applications that we're getting in. Are we really seeing a good representation across the full range of diversity? And that's about then really understanding what we can do better as an organization. But it is really hard. I mean, we don't, we're not big, we're not recruiting lots and lots of roles. And sometimes when you're looking at that data, actually, it's really hard to find a more diverse audience to even be presenting yourself to. And that's a kind of problem that starts much earlier that I'm sure we can talk about. But, I think the challenge though for us is, have we done everything we can to make sure that funnel is as wide as it can possibly be? And are we then actually understanding who is applying for the roles?
And to that point, Ellie, are there ever any challenges that you're facing, or indeed any other colleagues on the panel, around getting individuals to disclose that data right at that start point? So before they know much about you as an organization, or know about your culture, or indeed know any of your people, how are you really helping to improve that individual DE&I data disclosure right from that beginning point when they're not yet employees of Nominate?
So I think we do okay at that first point. What I would say actually is that, as well as at the first recruitment point, we're trying to build up a better insight into our existing employee base. And actually, as you start to gather data, there's a huge trust kind of exercise that you're going through at that point. People really want to understand why you want the data, what you're going to use it for, how it's going to be held, all of those things. So actually, our issue has been less about at the point of recruitment, but is definitely a challenge for us amongst our existing employee base, and one that we know we need to work harder at.
Great. And Lauren, as a larger employer, have you got any thoughts that you could share around this?
Yeah, I find it really interesting anecdotally, thinking then about how you present out, Ellie, and I picked up on it earlier on one of the sessions too, that I certainly didn't think I'd stay at Lloyds Banking Group as long as I had. I had this image of, like the old Mary Poppins with all like the old men in suits. And clearly, looking at me, you can see that that's not the case for everyone. But I'm sure that's still a lot of people's perception in banking, that, it's quite formal. I can still rock a suit when I need to, but, I've got the brightly coloured hair, the piercings refuse to grow up. I think we have a much better view on some of our I&D lenses, to Ellie's point, for our existing members of staff. So particularly from a gender and race perspective, because of the pay gap reports that we've done. I think there's a gap with broader inclusion diversity lenses, such as sexuality and disability. And we can probably come on to that a little bit later as to what the reasons might be behind that. I think we need to do more to understand the pipeline of people coming in, because as we all know, it can be hard to fix that once you've got bums on seats and, people in roles, and you see the effects that it has on your I&D figures. It can be hard to pull that back.
And sort of building on that, Chelsea, I'll go to you next, talking about that segmentation or that nuancing of data. Are there ways that organisations should be thinking about becoming more nuanced in how they use data throughout their people processes, and looking at that segmentation and recognizing that there are different pools of talent and different people, be it in attraction or indeed be it later in the employee pipeline?
So I don't know if I'll go off piste. I think we can become overdated. I saw Karen earlier talking about how many times we're going to say the word data, and I think we'll surpass that today in this session. I think there are so many different ways we can cut it, and my job is really, in essence, I look after inclusion diversity, but it's not as exciting or sexy as I think people think it is. I churn a lot of data, and I'm trying to look at, right, where are we seeing blocks, where are we seeing issues, and trying to identify those sort of systemic issues. We can look at it in so many different ways. And I think, interestingly, to kind of contrast to what Ellie was saying, we don't have a great ability to capture data at Beazley from the applicant stage. We do a great job once people have joined. We've got a really high disclosure rate on what we ask for, which is really good. We don't have a really good idea about our actual talent pool currently. We're going to try and invest in that. I don't think you need to be able to do everything data-wise before you can start making a real difference. We don't do well at the recruitment stage. We do much better at an onboarding stage. And I think Ellie's saying, maybe you're doing better at the applicant stage, trying to understand more about the current makeup. I think when it comes to looking at your solutions, and I said this just in that last session, being really bespoke with what you're doing and really trying to identify what the problem is that you think you're looking at. So if you're comparing different data sets, if you're thinking, okay, our population data says this, but our engagement survey data says this, where are we seeing a block? Okay, we can look at our promotional stats or our talent mapping stats, overlay that on our current employee base, look at what does that then tell us? Each of those will give you a particular focus on what that nuance is that you're talking about. One of the things I worry about when I present data is almost every single time a member of the exec or a member of the board will ask me to cut that data differently. We'll say, well, can we look at it through a different lens? And I think, well, we can look at it through 85,100,000 million lenses. The problem is not going to change, and that we're an undiverse organization. So can we stop cutting the data? And I think this, to your point, almost stop building awareness. Let's just start focusing on actually solving the problem. So I went off on a tangent there.
No, you didn't at all. And it's a fair point, because actually some of the key messages that we need to think about there in terms of what you're saying is, even if you haven't got everything solved and you haven't got your data resolved at every point across the employee lifecycle, starting somewhere is a good start, right? And recognizing that actually you can always cut and always dissect the data in a lot more detail. But again, we kind of already know what the problems are. So let's not now spend resources, time, and too much money on trying to rehash the problem or make it look slightly differently to appease whoever the next person is in senior management who wants to see it cut in a different way. Let's focus on the outcomes and the actions. And I think that's a really valid point for people to hear on this discussion today. Morgan, from your organisation across Unilever, who I know, of course, are very big and all over the world, how are you using data to change some of the people processes around retention and promotion across the organisation and in different parts of the world?
Yeah, thanks. And a great discussion as well. I love the, just get on with it type message. I think we always talk about decision quality data. And I think there can be no wrong choice if you're doing something to support DE&I. It's not, making a decision between a marketing campaign that I can invest X amount of money in, or another marketing campaign, right? We're doing things to make the world a better place. And so I love that push and that motivation. Specifically to your question, though, on promotion and retention, in 2018, we started a partnership with a professor at Harvard. Her name's Iris Bonet. And with her guidance, we launched a metric called the gender appointment ratio. It's not a fancy, complicated algorithm. It's really just a calculation on the number of women appointed divided by the number of men appointed. And we use that metric, though, to give line managers a really clear picture of their appointment decisions over time, which really helps raise awareness so they can make better, more unbiased choices the next time the opportunity arises. And specifically within data and analytics, one of the things that we've done as well is to create a very objective kind of skills framework for key roles that really reduce some of the subjectivity associated with promotions that might lead to bias of male behaviors, like, again, confidence and maybe interrupting and certain kind of meeting skills versus the technical skills to get to the next level. And then when we map the readiness of all the individuals for promotion, we really ensure that we look at those time horizons very objectively and encourage people to apply when they are ready. And then if we have somebody that's not ready, to get them in a mentorship situation so that they can develop those skills to get to the next level. On retention as well, we look at data, of course, movement and retention between different demographic groups. So understanding the nuances of men versus women, managers versus non-managers, newcomers versus people that have been at the company for quite a while, which really helps us to identify where there might be trouble spots and then go back and then take some interventions there.
That's really helpful. And a question now that I probably would like to throw out to all of you, because it's something that's come in to us via the audience questions, is when we're thinking about the various people processes that we've talked about, so be it hiring, be it retention, be it promotion, how are companies thinking about making sure that they're increasing that diversity without it seeming like they're just hiring somebody to tick a box, to use the words that you use, Lauren, right? So to make sure that actually the focus is on having the best person for the role, and it's not data being used to just make sure we can say, yeah, we've ticked that box, we've got enough women or enough people from a certain historically underrepresented group. How is it that actually we can be framing those conversations and taking those actions within organizations to truly focus on the importance of diversity? I'm not sure who wants to go first, but want to open it to you all. Lauren, go for it.
I'm happy to pick up just because you referenced the tick box, and just to build on that. And I did that purposefully, right? Yeah. Because I happened to select a few tick boxes on a survey, but I don't want my success to be defined by the boxes that I tick. I hope that my success is defined by the impact I have. And that's why I was really delighted last week, and I don't know how many of you will have read it, that we have a really, I think, inspiring new kind of purpose-driven mission at LBG, where inclusion and diversity is now embedded throughout everything we do, be that for colleagues and customers. It's not, we have ambitions and that's great, but that's not what it is. We live and breathe it, and it has to be the responsibility of everyone, be that for our colleagues or our customers. And those cultural shifts and those changes where, you know, leaders really walk the talk, but also everyone feels that responsibility, are hard, but it absolutely has to be the right thing to do. It's not about hitting certain demographics and targets. It's about really doing the best thing for us as people and colleagues and customers.
No, I completely agree. Chelsea, come in there.
I don't think we should shy away from the conversation. If you put up a big sign saying women welcome here, or members of the LGBT community welcome here, that should be a great thing. And I think that's what we're seeing. The more you put yourself out there to say, please come and work for us, we're a great place, it shouldn't then be about this quota filling. If you're quite quiet about it and be like, oh gosh, we really need to get, more women, and we're not going to mention why or anything, but I think it's about how you approach the discussion and how you kind of overall put it out there. We've very similar to what Lauren said, we've really embedded diversity in what the company stands for, and when we talk about it on our job descriptions and we talk about it on our recruitment website, and we're continually emphasizing this importance of diversity of thought and background and all of this. And I think that's really showing that you respect what people are bringing and you want them there because of that, not because Lauren said, they happen to tick a box and you can then sort of quietly enter that into your annual report and not ask about it again. I think there's a difference in saying you're welcome versus, we need you to tick a box.
And a question to sort of build on that, how do you within your respective organisations challenge the naysayers who say, oh, well, she only got the promotion because she's just come back from maternity leave, or he only got the promotion because we haven't got any LGBTQ people in our management team, etc., etc., etc. So how do you guys challenge those notions using and leveraging data that you have access to?
I think this to me goes to that myth busting that I kind of mentioned. I think I hear that all the time. People are like, oh, they only got the job. I'm like, oh, did you not think they were very good then? And I say that to them, and they're like, oh no, she's fantastic. She's so. I'm like, oh, okay, then so what's the problem? But actually, it's this, because it's a woman, or it might be someone from an ethnic minority background. They're different. They're different to our white man standard, and that's worthy of comment. And I think it's that using data to be like, oh, okay, well, actually, only 30% of our promotions so far have been women, not 70% that you seem to think. Going continually back to what the data is telling us to reference that is my point.
I think that's a really important point, and having that data and having that data to support those challenging conversations sometimes is really, really helpful, right? Because actually there's a perception that forms from individuals, and the reality and showcasing that through data, I think, is a really powerful tool. One of the questions that we're getting, again, come up quite a lot from our audience is we're talking about the importance of data and how that can really help frame and shape some of the interventions or actions that are taken within organisations. It'd be really helpful to hear from all of you how you've gone about getting people to disclose that data within your respective organisations. You know, was it easy? Was it difficult? What tactics and tools did you use to get people to be willing and open to share that data? I don't know who to start with. Morgan, I'll start with you first, if you give a bit of insight.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that helps is just, again, kind of our overall accountability and focus on this. So our CEO views this as one of his, again, top 3 priorities. And so he communicates about it very frequently. And we recognize where we have data gaps and where we need to step up. So again, obviously the gender component is a bit easier for us to track and have visibility to. But when we get into the other identity groups like race and ethnicity or disability or LGBTQI, that's when we need to, again, kind of encourage and get that data shared back. I think the thing that's helped us as well is in addition to the constant communication, is that we have a big focus on data ethics. So not just privacy, but doing the right thing with data and being very transparent as well with employees, how we're using data in the same way that we are with our consumers. So I think that messaging is really, really powerful. But also we have a long way to go, just like a lot of organizations.
No, that's really helpful. Lauren, wondered if you could share about how Lloyds have really kind of helped to drum up the disclosure rates.
Yeah, and sorry, I think there's a bit of feedback on my line, so I'm having to be muted and unmuted. Apologies for the delay there. And I want to come back to Chelsea's point as well around, I don't think we do enough at Lloyds to shout about how great we are. And one of the reasons I bring that in here is we're using a lot of our networks that we have for, inclusive and diverse spaces around LGBT and access for disability, as well as our more traditional, reach for BAME and also breakthrough for gender, to really understand what are the blockers for people, because we do a lot to make sure people are supported. What are the blockers for people disclosing? I think for gender, it's more straightforward because of our HMRC requirements as a bank to disclose gender for employees. That brings its own nuances because it's not inclusive, because you don't have non-binary as an option due to the way we have to report it. And also the pay gap reports that we've done on both gender and ethnicity have helped us in that space. But again, picking up on some of the language that I think both Morgan and Chelsea have used, is it any surprise really where people don't disclose things that don't outwardly present where they may have been treated negatively for it in the past, or an assumption has been made about them? I think personally about my disclosure journey, I didn't disclose my disability or my sexuality until recently. I say recently, 2 to 3 years. That wasn't because I was ashamed of who I was. I was very comfortable with it, but I'd been treated differently because of it in the past, and it made me uncomfortable. So we need to give people that safe space to acknowledge that we're not like that as an organisation, and we are going to treat you with the respect you deserve no matter who you are, and we respect that journey is personal.
No, absolutely. And Ellie, any thoughts from Nominate?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, this is definitely an area where we've got some way to go. We know that we're collecting that data at the point of applications into the organisation, but we are not cracking that in terms of our existing employee base, and it's not big, and there's really no excuse for that. And so I think the process for us at the moment is trying to really get underneath that and understand why people aren't as prepared as we would hope they would be to provide that information. And I think that it's really interesting to hear what other people are saying in terms of how important it is, the messaging from the very top of the organisation, how important it is that people see how that data is treated. And ultimately, I mean, for us, it's incredibly important because we want to use it to really understand people's experiences in the business, understand their engagement in the organisation, and all of the things that will make us a better place to work. But it's, we've got some way to go. So I'm not for a minute suggesting that we've cracked that.
No, absolutely. And I think for most organisations, there is still an element of the journey in the diversity data space that, everybody can move further forward. I know that, again, speaking from personal experience, one of the challenges that we faced was individuals feeling as though actually our senior leadership leading the way as it relates to providing their diversity data. Are there role models right at the top of the organisation who are able and willing to share? Because if they're able and willing to share, then maybe there's more trust that's built into the system for those kind of further down the organisational chain. And so I've worked with and in and for organisations where actually there's been kind of a big campaign that's focused on role models telling their personal story and using that as the hook to then talk about, and actually this is why it was important for me to disclose data, because this is how this helped me within the organisation. We've talked a lot about diversity data specifically, but I suppose I want to shift and change the conversation just slightly to talk a bit about inclusion, right? So we often talk about diversity and inclusion, and often we're able to think about how we can measure representation, be it through attraction, be it through promotion, be it through retention. But then what about inclusion data? And so I suppose, Lauren, I wanted to go to you first to understand what are Lloyds doing around inclusion data? How are you measuring inclusion, if at all? And what about some of the other facets and lenses that come into that? So, yeah, I wondered if you could share about your journey or insights from Lloyds.
Yeah, of course. And I think we've picked up on some of the key themes, right? So I think that the word safe is key to inclusion more and more, and different people will have different things they need in order to feel truly safe and talk about how included they feel. And it's not something that's easily achieved for all. I think there was a comment earlier about, the secret sauce, and I think it's a very varied recipe depending on who you are and what you feel comfortable disclosing. And that's compounded. I talked to all of you right before we came on this call saying I'm naturally introverted. I get nervous talking about things like this. Disclosing how you feel as an inclusion is a personal thing. And what we're trying to do at Lloyds, picking up actually on some of the points you just raised, is get more people talking about it at all levels. How have they been on that inclusion diversity journey? How do they feel now? How do we capture that data, moving away from just point-in-time surveys that give us a once and done point of view at times per year? We're still on that journey, but as I said earlier, putting it into our ethos as a company and having it lived every day where people feel like they can just go, actually, do you know what? This happened today, and I feel the need to talk about how that made me feel not included. Or on the opposite side, I went on an access course last week for my disability, and I've been speaking about ever since how included I felt and seen for really well for the first time in a long time about my disability as a superpower. Giving people those safe spaces to share that is really important. And that's a journey we're still on, but something we're really focusing on.
That's really helpful. Chelsea, any thoughts around inclusion data specifically?
So we compare we've got engagement surveys, and we've got pulse surveys that were happening throughout the pandemic, just checking in on people. And we try and look at those through a diversity lens, and I think that's our best measurement, really. How engaged are people feeling in the company? I was just presenting these a couple of weeks ago, so we know that there's a slight difference in how people from underrepresented groups are feeling, but actually not as big a difference as we might have expected. There are then differences in how they maybe feel about their management or how they feel about communication within the company. One of the things you were talking about, that intersectionality of data, one of the things that I saw is that people who identify as bisexual really actually were not as engaged as people from other sexuality groups, and so we were like, oh, there's a problem there we didn't know about, and so that's quite helpful. I think that engagement data is how we try and pinpoint that inclusion. But then we look at that obviously with promotional data, with what our senior leadership looks like, and all of those other layers, because that's likely to, inclusion can feel intangible, but actually having some ways of measuring it, I think, and showing progress against it using data becomes really helpful.
That's some helpful insight. And a question to sort of follow up from me, one of the questions that's come in from the audience is, we're talking a lot about the importance of data, but it'd be really helpful to get maybe a brief insight from all of you around any specific tools that you're using to map out your data. How are you statistically analyzing your data within your organizations? Is that done by a specific individual? Is it done by a team? Is it a kind of ready-made tool that you buy in? Just to give those on the call a bit of insight, you know, depending on whether they are a small business, a large business, to really just understand how it's being handled within your respective organizations at the moment, if you're able to share. Ellie, if I go to you first.
Well, we have a person in our HR team, but we are 300 people. So, you know, that's the simplest way for us to handle it.
But that means you've got a dedicated resource who is focused and able to look at the data, manipulate the data and analyze the data.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, not a side of desk job, actually part of somebody's role, which is critical,
Yes.
right? Because often when we think about DEI data, it becomes the add-on to somebody's other day job. And so I want to just highlight that point. Morgan, I don't know if you can give some insight.
Unilever is quite large, but I think we obviously view it as very, very important and invest behind it and have a, you know, again, a senior kind of people analytics team that focuses on this in addition to other pillars, because we just, again, view this as so critical to company performance. It's key to our financial performance, our market share, our innovation. So we definitely have, again, a team and great tools to kind of assess this.
Great. Lauren.
Yeah, so a bit like Morgan, big organisation. We have a number of dedicated teams who work on this together as a team of teams, looking at it as, you know, a group people insight piece of information. We also have an inclusion diversity team, and teams like mine who are just really passionate about getting it right and have some data skills where they can help out. I think we've been on a journey again the last couple of years where we've wanted to really think of wider diversity as almost a system and a model, and tried to understand how the different things interact, because that's the other element at play here. It's easy to think of it, and we often describe it like this actually, like diversity is bathtub and you've got the tap that fills it up and the plug at the bottom, but actually the complex relationships across different aspects of diversity mean that you can't look at it like that anymore. So we've actually spent a lot of advanced analytics time looking at how that system works together in a complex landscape.
Okay, can I just ask, sorry, I was just going to ask Lauren a quick question. Does that mean you're looking at predictive analytics as well as actually historic analytics? So you can really start to understand what might come, you know, what you might see coming through as opposed to just what's been?
Yeah, so we've been looking at different levers that we could potentially pull to make job attractiveness more of reality. What would that impact be on applicants, for instance, both internally and externally? It's really hard to look at all of the diversity lenses together. It's hard to even look at one if we look at F+ female demographics, but we've been really trying to think about how do those things interplay together and how might that affect it? Because if you bring in a lot of females, that might affect another demographic that impacts you negatively. So yeah, we've been looking at that.
Chelsea, anything to add from your side?
I was just saying, I'm always so jealous hearing about the capacity of larger organisations. So even though we're about 1,500 people, our capacity for data isn't really, it's not that advanced, and it's something I do. I'm a dedicated DE&I resource, and it's something I do. I want to put people's mind, but I just do a lot of very basic work on Excel. My work is very manual. It's not been, we don't have fancy tools or fancy systems to be able to produce a lot of this. My advice to people is to draw on other people in the company. As Lauren says, you have your champions in other parts of the company that really care and are likely to have better skills than you do. I've got actuaries who are fantastic at data manipulation, who I call upon every time I need something done from maybe a predictive. We were trying to work out what our hiring rate needs to be for the future, and they were fantastic at doing that. Or people in our IT team who are so good at being able to create workarounds for that data. So your HR team is likely to have some data. They might not have the capacity to analyze it in a smaller company, but can you be the funnel of that? Can you make sure that data is anonymized and protected, and work with other teams to help draw on that? You've got the capacity often within your organizations. It's just about trying to find who's going to help you.
And I think that sense of social responsibility is something people are looking for more and more. So I think, to build on that, Chelsea, if you're sitting listening to this, think I've got the skills, but I don't have the data. reach out. That's what my team did, and we've been, you know, helping people. I think it's really important that people put their hands up to volunteer to be the change they want to see.
Absolutely. And I think building on that, it's not only the manipulation of data, it's also thinking about actually what questions can we be asking to interrogate any data that we do have access to, or any information that is available, and how do you then use that to inform your solution? So again, thinking within your own organizations, are there some questions that you're using to then help you guide towards the potential outcome or interventions?
What I'll say on, and you saw from myself and Brad earlier, and I work with Brad, who's the senior leader in our IT team, a lot on what our diversity interventions are going to be on some of our issues. My advice to people is make sure that the solution that you are attempting to implement matches a data identified problem, because we talk about things like blind CVs. Now, some people came up to me being like, we've heard that other companies are doing this thing called blind CVs. We really need to do that at Beazley. And I thought, well, if we want diversity, which we do, and we're actively saying that, I think we probably need to see people's names. We need to know if there are women coming through, because we should be looking to prioritize their applications and bringing them through. But let me go. So we crunched our data to be like, okay, what are our agencies giving us? Are we losing women? What we found is that we were bringing women through in terms of interviews at exactly the same proportion they were applying in, and we were hiring them in that same proportion. So actually implementing a blind CV review didn't match a problem that we had in the company. So actually that would have been a wasted effort. Rather, we could have put our effort on making sure we were attracting even more women to apply to begin with. And I think that's my sort of advice, is make sure that there's so many gimmicks in diversity and inclusion. There are, over the last few years, everyone started a business selling something in regards to diversity and inclusion, and there's so many great tools. Just make sure that what you're actually wanting to implement really identifies something, and it's not just something you've seen another company do in a really cool way that you think you should copy. Because I think, as we've said, each that secret sauce is so different to every single company, as well as the individuals within it.
Absolutely. And I think it's also about remembering, almost as you said, Chelsea, not to reinvent the wheel, right? So lots of people have been working in the diversity and inclusion space for a very, very long time. And there are a number of different solutions out there, multifaceted, set up in slightly different ways. But exactly as you said, they're going to look slightly different in your respective organizations, because there'll be different areas of underrepresentation, or different challenges, or different investment, be that resource, be that time, be that senior leadership buy-in. And so it's figuring out what is going to work within your organization, and what is going to also work in terms of being fit for purpose from a cultural perspective, because trying to fit, a square peg into a round hole is going to be very, very difficult if you're pushing against the grain, have no buy-in, have no support, and kind of end up being that one-man band champion on your own, without anybody else really helping to drive things forward across the broader organization. And I think that's really, really critical to remember. Talking specifically around the senior leadership point, because I think it's a blocker that we often hear people talking about within organizations. How are you able to challenge or push back on senior leaders who are just asking for various different cuts of data in an attempt to not move further forward along the action, the kind of action scale, right? So they're using that, oh, I need to see this in a different way, or oh, I need more information, as a barrier to actually investing the time, the effort, the resources to tackling the challenge. And how do you have those conversations in an organization, whether it's a small one or a very, very large one? I'll go to Morgan first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the most important thing with diversity and inclusion, though, is to find the people with the will and the skill, and to make them your champions and advocates. And I think that's been raised in other contexts of the discussion around data. But one of the big things I think that is important right now to explain to senior leaders is this difference between diversity and inclusion. I think diversity is very straightforward and people understand, and it's about numerical representation. But I think the inclusion bit is what needs more explanation, and needs more understanding, and needs more awareness within most organizations and within the industry about what are the elements that make us able to kind of bring our whole selves to work. And again, we know from the data that inclusive leaders drive a lot of that impact. So the majority of our culture is based on how leaders behave. And one of the things that we did as kind of an intervention was to work with a third-party company to develop an inclusive leadership training approach, where we implement this across all of the VPs and above in our organization. And it includes like a 360 coaching, and plus kind of, again, some interventions to kind of open their eyes to different aspects of diversity and inclusion. And we found that this was really powerful to give them that self-reflection and self-assessment of how inclusive they are as a leader, and where are they maybe not an inclusion champion, where could they be advocating in a better way, and what's the impact that that's having on their team. And I think that, bringing it back to them as a person is a really, really powerful motivator, and gets you out of these kind of, like, again, comparing the data and trying to make the data say what you want the data to say.
That's really helpful. Ellie, any thoughts, insights?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the last couple of years have been really clearly created a huge amount of challenge, but they've also, from our perspective, if anything good has come out of it, created an opportunity for us to significantly increase the pool from which we're hiring talent. And that, I think, brings the potential for clearly, more diverse applicants coming through. And that's fantastic. It brings, though, a challenge, though, around that inclusion piece. We know we are having to think about new ways of working. We know we're having to do things differently. And then when you have an inclusion lens over that as well, it adds an additional complexity. So I don't think we're having to so much push back. And certainly we don't almost have enough data for it for an easy excuse to be to go away and slice this in a different way. But I think what we are having to do is challenge ourselves to think differently as the organisation becomes kind of the new normal. What is that going to look like? What does that mean in terms of the diversity of applicants coming through the door? But equally, how are we going to make sure that from senior leaders through all of our managers, we have a real focus on an inclusive organisation in that new way of working?
And talking about the importance of that inclusive organisation, Lauren, I want to go to you because you referenced employee networks or employee resource groups earlier in the conversation. And I just wanted to get a sense on whether you are using inclusion and diversity data alongside some of the work that you're doing with the employee networks and employee resource groups to understand how underrepresented groups in specific departments or specific parts of the business are feeling, reacting, growing and developing within the organisation, and if so, how are you doing that?
So it's a step that we're looking to take and have started to take with some of our networks, some of our brave networks that have decided to go on the journey, namely REACH, which is our kind of race education network for BAME colleagues. Not saying that we've got anything perfect, because I don't think anyone can be perfect in this space, because it's always evolving and changing. And I think the data ethics piece, and apologies, I don't know who brought it up earlier, is a really important one here, because yes, you want your data to be used to influence the company you work at to make it more inclusive, but you also want it to be used in a safe way, because that's data that's personal to you. So we are looking at ways that we can be more accurate in capturing that data with the permission of the people whose data it is, and then use that to drive conversations about how we can make those groups of people feel more included. But again, and I keep coming back to this, all of these journeys are personal, and I think that's what's so complex, and why I wanted to really make the point that no one's going to get it right all the time, because my journey based on my intersectionality, someone else's journey that's the same intersectionality as me or someone different is going to be completely different. And that's why I think it's about us all showing up across all of those pillars, those verticals, and just being there and being part of the discussion, trying things. I think we can sometimes get, and I'm sure others around the call have probably done the same, you take the data, you do the same thing, you go back a month later, nothing's changed, and then people wonder why. Don't be afraid to try new things as long as people feel comfortable. And I think that's the part of the journey we're now starting to go on in Lloyds, where we're trying to be a bit braver and bolder about the type of initiatives that we run and ways that we can use the data differently to see more progress.
No, I think that's really critical. And I think it's using data as an information source before, during and after an intervention that I think is really critical, right? And so if I think about, again, organisations I've worked within and for, looking at inclusion and diversity data around certain historically underrepresented groups and overlaying that on engagement survey questions and going, hang on, if we have a huge disparity between how one group or one population might be feeling and another, why is that if we are truly treating people in an equitable fashion? Is that because we're not communicating in a way that's landing? Is it that we're not showcasing empathy or that support in a way that aligns with certain individuals? And you're able to kind of pick through that and go, hang on, where is it that we have challenges here? Is it something specific to one department, specific to one area, specific to one manager in some instances? And if so, let's have those difficult conversations and try and come up with solutions. I'm conscious. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was going to say, I think it's another important message that I really want to land with people listening on this call, that also if you see something like that and you observe it, don't walk past it. Don't assume that it's been reported by someone else or it's an idea that's been taken. We've all got that duty. I'm sure we've all had situations where someone said, oh, I didn't select something because actually I didn't feel represented, or, someone said this to me and that made me feel uncomfortable and now I don't want to talk about this anymore. Don't walk past those scenarios. Go and talk to the people that can change it.
Absolutely. I'm really conscious of time, so I'm going to drill us down to just one final question. And it's a question for everybody. So if there was one solution that you could think of, or based on your experience within your organization, you'd really be recommending to an organization of a similar size, what will it be? And I'm hoping we're going to get 4 different solutions or 4 different ideas there to leave people with today. So I won't choose who goes first, because I know it then becomes really difficult for whoever goes last. So whoever wants to go first, feel free to take yourself off mute and share your one solution that you'd give to others working in an organization of a similar size.
It's not data specific, but I think the most important thing for us has been telling the stories of more diverse people within our organization in a way that is really public and relatable. That has been the most significant thing that we've done as a smaller business.
Brilliant, Ellie. So telling the stories to help really bring it to life and make it relevant to all colleagues. Chelsea?
Yeah, mine is to start somewhere. So don't worry that we've not got all the data for the whole international company before we start. Start with just your team. If you've got a team that's willing to give their data, or a department that's willing to give their data, and you've got a leader of that department that's bought in, start using that to be the change. Because once you start to see that knock-on effect and being transparent with that data, you'll start to see other teams follow. So start somewhere. I think we wait until, we've got to wait until we've got all the data and everything's absolutely perfect. No, there's small ways and we can start. Don't start with everything. Don't worry that we've got to get everyone's social mobility data right. Just start with gender. Start with that. If that's what we're struggling with, let's start small and start seeing success and really build upon that for future change. That would be mine.
That's really helpful, Chelsea. So recognizing we don't have to have all of the solutions sewn up before we do anything, and recognizing that might be different across different jurisdictions. That might be different if you're a big global company and there are certain legislative rules that mean you can do one thing in one part of the world and not another. But the key element, as Chelsea said, there is to start somewhere. Who wants to go next? Lauren, I think you're off mute.
Yeah, I think, Chelsea, I heard in the break, I can't remember the lady's name from HB, saying think big, act now, act small. So if you've gone for the act small bit, I'm going to go think big, because I think that we've got the problems that we live with now. We can really instigate real change if we look further down the line, work more with talent pipelines, schools, creating those safe spaces for people coming up from a young age so they don't face the same problems that we're facing in the workplace today.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And finally, Morgan.
Yeah, I think we've said a lot of great ideas and again reinforced some great thinking here. I think the biggest thing for us is just the ownership and accountability across the organization. So again, explain what's in it for them and make sure that you hold people accountable to it in the organization, and really put the investment and the muscle behind it and the senior leadership sponsorship. And then the second thing I would say is just think about as well how you can extend it to other parts of your business. I love that Lauren said, thinking about the pipeline that's coming into the industry. We need to think about the ripples and the positive impacts we can have outside of our own workplaces for consumers, for the next generation of leaders. So I think that's the other really kind of key thing, is just not making it all about us.
No, absolutely. And I think in that vein of not making it all about us, my final thing that I would say to individuals on the call is it's recognizing that actually everybody can play a part in this inclusion and diversity journey. It's not just HR or the data analytics team or those who have great statistical skills. Actually, we can all be a part of contributing to moving organizations further along that journey. But starting somewhere, thinking big, getting everyone involved, getting the accountability buy-in, and making sure that we're moving further forward in a way that resonates with people, tells their stories, is what is critical if we really want to drive the change. So with that, I'll just say a massive thank you to our panelists today. Really appreciate the conversation, and thank you to everyone who was sharing questions. I know there will be a feedback survey also coming out, but a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on the discussion today.
So thank you so much, Adeline and the panel. I loved watching the questions come in. I'm sorry we haven't got to all of them. We'll get to some of them in our session again, because we want to carry on that conversation. What Adeline was mentioning, and that what we had hearing from the group, is that what are we doing with the data, and are we measuring impact? Are we willing to look and think, how are we doing? Is this working? Is it not? Is there a surprise? Should we go back to first purposes on this? Keep moving, but never just keep doing it because we think it should work. We need to measure and think about impact. So to dig deeper into hearing from some companies who are on that journey of not just gathering data, not just using inclusion and diversity data to drive action, but who are actually then trying to step back and think about analyzing the impact, to wonder to really understand what is working in your company. Because as we said, just because it works in one company doesn't work in another. We don't use a sledgehammer to saw a board. We've got to find the right tool that works for our company. So let me ask my panel to join me. I've got a great panel to talk about data and measuring impact.